Welcome to my Standing on the Shoulders of Giants series, or perhaps it's better to say continuing the work of giants. So this is the series in which I talk about the lives and works of various disability rights activists. And today's video is about Judy Heumann. We finally did it. Here is the video about Judy Heumann. Hi, welcome to Minerva. I'm Vera, and on my channel we talk about everything disability related. That can range from talking about various disabilities and illnesses and talking about the lives and works of disability rights activists. So, I wanted to kick off this series with Judy Heumann, as she is widely regarded to be the mother of the disability rights movement. And to be honest, she was just an all-around badass person. So, I chose Judy Heumann as a good starting point. And then I started researching, and I kept researching, and I kept researching, and the research just never ended. She was everywhere. The impact that this one person has had is huge, and it's almost impossible to overstate her importance in the disability rights movement. The number of things that she was involved in is astounding, and it is impossible to do a short introduction. I still think that she's the perfect person to start with, or maybe especially because there is so much to cover. This has grown from a 15-minute video to a multi-part series. There is just so much to say. I hope you enjoy learning about her as much as I enjoyed learning about her. That being said, I can't possibly get into everything that she was a part of, or this video would be 5 hours long. Like I said before, it's impossible to overstate her importance and influence on the disability rights movement both in America and worldwide. Personally, I don't like using the word hero because I think it makes people think that regular everyday people can't step up and do the right thing. But she was without a doubt a hero. I will do my best to give you as much information about her without overloading her. But I will also leave some links in the description so that you can read some more about her if you want to. And I highly recommend you do because, like I said, she was amazing. I will also leave a link to where I bought the ebook of her memoir, Becoming Human, which was co-written with Kristen Joyner. This book will not just tell you about her life, but it is also a masterclass in community organizing and activism. Like I said before, this video might be really long, and I think that we will be forced to put it into a multi-part series because there's just so much to tell. Also because we have to contextualize some events and some people in order for you to understand what's happening. I can't tell this video about Judy Heumann without also talking a little bit about the people that she worked with. Her story is just as much theirs. And all of these people are worthy of having their own video dedicated solely to them, which is something that I'm definitely interested in doing in the future. But I am really wary of turning this video in a kind of white American type of activism. So if you know about people who aren't white, first of all, or aren't American, and who were important in the disability rights movement in your country, then please let me know about them in the comments below because I would love to make a video about them. If you would like to see more of these videos and you would like to see part 2 and potentially even part 3 about Judy Heumann, then make sure that you like this video, you subscribe to the channel, and make sure to hit that bell to get notifications when a new video comes up. It really does help a new channel out. So let's get to it. Judith Ellen Heumann was born on December 18, 1947 in Philadelphia, but she grew up in Brooklyn, New York City. She contracted polio at 18 months, which meant for her that she had to spend 3 months in an iron lung, and that she thereafter had to use a wheelchair to get around. Both of her parents were German Jews who fled to America to escape the Nazi regime. In 1935, her mother, and 1934, her father. Her grandparents, her great-grandparents and other family members were all killed in the Second World War. She had 2 brothers. I have no doubt that the experiences of Judy's parents, having to flee Nazi Germany and losing family members because of murder, influenced her parents' decision not to put Judy into the residential home, as they were in fact recommended to do by a doctor. Just a quick side note to show you what life is like in 1947 for disabled people. parents were often recommended to put their disabled children into residential homes, and they were not necessarily encouraged to visit them either. In the words of Judy Heumann, they came from a country where families were separated, some children sent away, others taken away from the authorities and to never be returned, all part of the campaign of systemic dehumanization and murder, as she wrote in Becoming Human, her memoir. Their daughter, disabled or not, wasn't going anywhere. Her parents, and especially her mother, Ilse, a community organizer in her own right, also fought for Judy to have as much of a normal life as possible. Judy also actually touches on this in her memoir as well. She said, "If I had been born 10 years earlier and in Germany, my parents would have also been advised to put me into a residential home by a doctor. Only I would have almost certainly been killed by such a doctor." Her life was pretty normal until it was time to be enrolled into elementary school. The day that Judy and her mother Ilse went to enroll Judy into elementary school, the principal blocked their way. Judy was not allowed to go to school because she was considered to be a fire hazard. Yes, children who used wheelchairs weren't even considered to be human. In Judy's words, "Though my life wasn't marked with the little whites-only signs that singled segregation in the South, my life was also a segregated one." Ilse Heumann worked tirelessly to get her daughter admitted into public school, and eventually she was placed on the waiting list for Health Conversation 21, which was a program for children with disabilities. Before she was accepted into the program though, she had to have an evaluation that assessed her abilities, which should have been illegal, but because Judy was disabled, no one cared. Health Conversation 21 was not a normal school program. The disabled children and the non-disabled children were completely segregated from each other, with the disabled children being put into the basement, except for Fridays, where non-disabled children were allowed to go downstairs and help the disabled children up for assembly. In her memoir, Judy talks that even as children they had conversations amongst themselves about why they were treated differently. Why weren't they allowed to go to school? And even though they were very young, they had a very keen eye on the discrimination that they experienced. Looking back, Judy said, "Now I know that what we were all beginning to learn was what today might be called disability culture." Judy also said that in America, school was considered to be so important that since 1918 it was compulsory, except for disabled children. In this school, instruction time added up to be around 3 hours every day, which that is so little. The first watershed moment in Judy's life on the way to becoming the disability icon that she became was attending and later becoming a counsellor at Camp Jeanette. Now, Camp Jeanette is also covered in a documentary on Netflix called Crip Camp, and it's covered way better than I ever could. So I recommend that you watch that movie if you want to and if you can. The reasons why this camp was so important was twofold. First, it was a camp made for disabled children, where they had access to everything and they weren't discriminated against. Judy said, "Camp, I thought, was what it would be like if society included us." Therefore, it is not a stretch to say that Camp Jeanette was instrumental in her future activism, but it was important for another reason as well. The second reason why this camp was so important was because it got her in touch with other disabled people who would later also become instrumental in the disability rights movement. People like Nancy D'Angelo, Jim Lebrecht, and Denise Sherman Jacobson. Judy was allowed to go to a non-disabled high school, but it also wasn't such a pleasant experience for her, because at the time she didn't yet have an electric wheelchair. So she had to ask people to help her get around, go to a different classroom and go to the bathroom, for example, which I can only imagine how that must have made her feel. Judy graduated high school and went to Long Island University to study speech therapy. It wasn't her first choice. Judy actually wanted to become a teacher, but she wasn't actually allowed to study to become a teacher because there had been no disabled teachers before her. Therefore, the rehab, the US Vocational Rehabilitation Center, didn't allow her to actually go and study to become a teacher. Can you imagine someone telling you what you can and can't study because of your disability? Judy said that at the time, there are only about 2 professions which were considered to be suitable for disabled women. They were speech therapy and social worker. And she also said that for disabled men, it was accounting and 1 or 2 other professions that were considered to be suitable for disabled men. Again, can you imagine someone telling you what you can and can't study because you're disabled? Partly because of Judy's activism, disabled people are now free to pursue any type of education that they want. However, Judy told Rehab on the advice of a friend that she wanted to study to become a speech therapist and not a teacher as she actually wanted. So she majored in speech therapy and took classes in education, speech and theatre. During this time, she lived in a dorm on campus, but that dorm wasn't accessible either. There were 2 steps to get into the building, and there was another step to get into the bathroom. So Judy had to ask for help every time she wanted to go somewhere or had to use the bathroom. And for those of you who aren't disabled, I cannot tell you what it's like to be reliant on other people all the time, especially if something as basic as going to the toilet. But also the mental energy that it takes. You have to figure out who you can ask for help, how you can ask them for help and when you can ask them. But also you have to make sure that you don't drink too much so that you don't need to use the bathroom too much. And you have to make sure that you don't go out too much to make sure that you don't bother people as much, etc, etc. It's just really a very unpleasant situation to be in. However, Judy was determined to become a teacher, and despite not actually majoring in education, she had tutored children throughout uni. At that time, because of the baby boom, you could not major in education and instead minor in it and still become a teacher. However, you did need to pass 3 exams, 1 oral, which she passed, 1 written, which she also passed, and a medical test, which she failed because of paralysis on both limbs because of polio. She was told that she was a danger to the children because she couldn't walk. She was told that she was unable to teach because she couldn't walk. I cannot even begin to understand that line of reasoning. One's ability to walk does not impact one's ability to teach. She called the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, to ask if there was something that could be done. But they said no, because discrimination had not occurred. Because it was legally impossible to discriminate against someone based on their disability status. You literally could not discriminate someone who was disabled because of their disability. In the Civil Rights Act of 1964, disability wasn't even mentioned, and that's why it wasn't legally possible to discriminate based on disability status. But Judy didn't take no for an answer, and she sued the New York Board of Education. And this is when Judy first rose to prominence. Judy made it very clear that that lawsuit was also because of her disabled friends. They all thought that they could make an example out of her. And the lawsuit was also only possible because of her disabled friends. One friend of her worked for the New York Times as a stringer and arranged to have her interviewed by Andrew Malcolm, who wrote the article "Women in Wheelchairs Sues to Become a Teacher." And the day after that, the New York Times wrote an editorial that came out in support of Judy. That same day, Roy Lucas, a lawyer who worked for the Madison Constitutional Law Center and who would later become one of the lawyers on the Roe v. Wade case, called her and asked if he could represent her. He was willing to take on her case, along with Elias Schwartzbart, a lawyer who frequented her father's butcher. Something that is extremely clear in Becoming Human is that Judy never fought just for herself. She always fought for every other person who might have the same stories as her. People who had experienced discrimination because of their disability, or people who had siblings or nibblings or parents or other family members who had experienced discrimination because of their disability. Although Judy ultimately did win her case, in her memoir she makes it extremely clear that actually the only reason, or one of the only reasons, that she won this case is because of the judge that was assigned to her. Her judge was Judge Constance Baker Motley, the first black woman to ever have been appointed to a federal court. And Judge Baker Motley did not take any shit. She ordered the Board of Education to resolve this matter ASAP, which turned out to be another medical review for Judy Heumann, which turned out to be a formality, and she passed the test with flying colours. And in fact, the person who did the medical test this time apologised to her and said that this should have never even happened in the first place. Judge Constance Baker-Motley deserves to have a video all of her own, but just to quickly sum up what an amazing type of person she was, and she really was. She was incredibly active in the civil rights movement. She was the first black woman to ever have graduated from Columbia Law School. She drafted the complaint in what would become Brown versus the Board of Education in Topeka. She represented the Freedom Riders. She was the first black woman to have been elected to the New York State Senate before she became the first black woman to be appointed to the federal court. How amazing is that? After this lawsuit, New York State finally passed legislation that said that people who were blind or otherwise physically disabled should not be barred from becoming teachers. After this lawsuit though, it took Judy quite a while to find a job. Most schools were inaccessible, and also most schools had already filled their positions. Eventually, the principal of her old school offered her a job, and she told her PS 219, the school that she had gone to herself. She ended up teaching the disabled and non-disabled children in regular education before eventually teaching her own classroom, which she did for 4 years. Another thing that the lawsuit did was that Judy and her friends decided to organize a civil rights movement for and by disabled people. At first, this was called Handicapped in Action, before they changed the name to Disabled in Action. She was elected to be its first president, and all of the members of the board were disabled people too. And they worked on a whole host of issues, including ending sheltered workshops and institutionalization, to fighting for accessible public transport, and protesting against the failure of the New York Times to report on disability as a civil rights issue. The organization worked with other organizations like Willowbrook, which was an absolute hellhole that people with developmental disabilities were housed, or actually more accurately, abused. Willowbrook is also featured very briefly on Crip Camp. And they worked with disabled veterans who came back from Vietnam. During the years after Judy got her teaching license, she taught and did whatever she could for Disabled in Action during the week, and on the weekends the DIA organized, protested and had meetings. She did this for a while until eventually Judy got a phone call from Ed Roberts, who is definitely the topic for another video. But he studied at Berkeley and he was one of the founders of the Center of Independent Living, and he offered her a job. The Center of Independent Living also was the first of its kind. They focused on empowerment and policies and services to allow disabled people to live independently. The state of California offered monetary support to disabled people so that they could hire personal assistants to no longer be dependent on friends and family. It also helped disabled people with finding accessible housing, for instance. Being able to interview and hire people whose job it was to help Judy when and how she needed it gave her a level of independence that was unprecedented to her, and a level of independence that was unprecedented to other disabled people too. The Center of Independent Living was so important, and this is why I think that Ed Roberts makes a perfect topic for another video. But I think I'm going to stop this video as it's already pretty long. Next week we will talk about Judy's work on Section 504 and the ADA. So make sure again to like this video and subscribe and hit the bell. It helps me out a lot. I hope you like this video and we'll see each other next week. Bye!